Hello family, welcome back to the study of the book of Galatians. And as I promised in the last week's video, today we're going to be looking at the cross. Last week we looked at being crucified with Christ, but it is by the cross of Christ. But what is this cross about? And last week again, just to give you a summary of what we covered, it was about this new way of living that we wanted to live, so desperately desire that we want to have. We've seen its fruit, we've seen how desirable it is, but sometimes it's not the reality in our lives. So that's where Paul actually introduces to us to the us that was crucified, or actually he introduces and he puts an end. He says that I that once existed, that now we call it the old man, it was the man of the flesh. And that's the thing that was crucified. But now all of that by the cross of Christ. Okay, now he said there are those who are actually, he says we are preaching the cross, but the problem is there are some who boast in something else, and that something else is the flesh. And now these are again believers. Paul is not talking to unbelievers. He's talking to the church, and by love he's bringing correction into their understanding of the gospel of Christ, because they haven't really necessarily seen or understood that something dramatic has happened, something has shifted, something has turned around. Christ was not an addition to that which was. Christ is a complete turnaround of that which was. Christ is not, bringing more laws into that which was. Christ was to put an end to the law forever and introduce a new way of living. And this is, again, I said, this is where people struggle. And they say, oh, how could you live a life that is pleasing to God if you don't keep His commandments? And I said, well, because of the new man that I have become. The old, yes, he wanted to live according to a way that was pleasing to God, but he lacked the power to do it, and therefore he was relying on himself and his works to do it. But the new way that Christ has showed us is the revelation of who we are in Him. And because of that, we can bear the fruit of the new man that we have become. He covered this in multiple and several different analogies and concepts. He talked about trees. And he said there are two types of trees, and their fruit is already defined what it's going to be. No good fruit can bear bad fruit, and no bad tree can bear good fruit. So he was saying that the fruit that you see is the result of the tree that is planted. So how is he going to change my fruit? Therefore, he's not going to remove the fruits. He's going to fix the tree. That's why the message of John the Baptist was the axe is at the root of the tree that does not bear good fruit. Okay, Jesus didn't come to remove the fruits. Jesus came to remove the tree. Jesus cursed the fig tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So all that struggle that started from the beginning, anything that Jesus does with it, it's not partial, it's complete. It's not to its branches or to its fruits, it's to its root, to take it completely out of the way. The garment that we had put on, the fig leaves that we had put on, he didn't give something to us to patch it. He said completely out of the way. Okay, so, or he doesn't mix the new wine with the old. He lets the old to completely go away, and then he gives the new. So these are the examples, the metaphors, the parables that Jesus gave to show us how this kingdom that he has brought for us work. We are not of the slave kind of people anymore. We are the people of the kingdom, and the kingdom has a king, and this king is declaring a truth to us, and that truth was declared from where he actually he was called the king's the king on a place, and then from that he declared something. Remember what that place was? It was the cross. So they put on the cross something that he's the king of the Jews, and then out of him came forth the word of forgiveness and remission of sin once and for all, and that was declared from that place, and that became a message that came from the cross. Okay, now that message has been expanding itself or unfolding itself in multiple levels, and we're beginning to see the depth of what that is. We are beginning to see what the cross actually is. We are beginning to see the cross is not only a piece of dry wood from 2,000 years ago where Jesus hung on. Cross is actually the power of God in us, working by the Spirit to make that which was old to become obsolete and go away. Because the work of the cross is to deal with that which needs to go away. The cross is used only to crucify. The cross is used only to kill. Okay, so the cross is the power of God that now does something inside of us. Okay, so that introduction was it was a long introduction, but it was to say that now today we are looking at the cross of Christ, and realize what actually it is. So let's look at a couple of verses in Galatians first to show you that actually this is in the context of the book of Galatians, and then we're going to look at a couple other epistles. Look at Galatians chapter 5, verse 11. And I, brethren, if I still preach circumcision, why do I still suffer persecution? Then the offense of the cross has ceased. Okay, so he says the cross has an offense. It offends people. But who are the ones that are being offended by the cross? Well, he says those who preach circumcision. What is that? It's a word, okay, for those who keep the law or those who are boasting in the law. Because it's not only circumcision, it's what comes through that word. I think it's in Ephesians that he calls the people that are Jews and they live under the old covenant the circumcised. Okay, so it's not just the circumcision in the flesh that they were doing. It's a word that was given to them as the people that are being circumcised. That meant that they have a law. That means they are under the law of Moses. Okay, so he says that therefore the message or the cross of Christ is offensive. It offends people, and those who are being offended, therefore they are those who are under the law. Okay, because why? Because its message is opposite to the law. The message is not due, the message is done. The message is not you have to keep, the message is it is finished. Okay, the message is not work, the message is rest. And this is offensive to those who want to, live that way. Now, in fact, in chapter 6, verse 12, once again, we read about these people. And as many as desire to make a good showing in the flesh, these would compel you to be circumcised, only that they may not suffer persecution for the cross of Christ. So once again, you see how the cross stands opposite to that which we call the circumcision or the law or the word of the law, all that concept. So anyways, now let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Look at verse 17. Now we're going to look at a couple of things that actually the cross deals with. Now we know we looked at the old man, the flesh, all of that in last week's message, but today we are going to add to it. Look at chapter 1, verse 17. Let me start from verse 14 so you have a context. I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, lest anyone should say that I had baptized in my own name. Yes, I also baptized the house of Stephanus. Besides, I do not know whether I baptized any other. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of no effect. For the message of the cross, for the message of the cross, once again, for the message of the cross. So the cross has a message, or the cross is a message. Okay? The cross is a message. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. Who are those who are perishing? Those who live by the works. Who are they? Those who are on the law. Those who are in the flesh. Those who are not seeing what God is showing. Those who are still have closed their ears and they live by the dictates of their own hearts. Those who don't see their value. Those who don't know who they are. Remember, the same word is used in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son into the world, that whoever believes in him shall not perish. So that means they are already perishing. And what does that mean? That they are, 1 Peter chapter 2, I think verse 24 says, all flesh is as grass, and the glory of man as the flower of the grass. Okay? And the grass withers. See, that's the perishing. The grass withers and its glory fades away. Man and his glory. What is man's glory? It says all man is as grass. Okay? And its glory will fade away. That which you have accomplished by the flesh, that's the glory of man in the flesh. That which you have accomplished, that's that which you have done. The rich man came to Jesus and he said, I have done all of these things, and that was his glory. Okay? And those who are being perished, these are those who are under the system of the law of works, and they are perishing. And he says this message of the cross is foolishness to them who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Okay, the message of the cross is the power of God. The message of the cross is the power of God. That means the power of God works through the cross. Okay, that means the cross is where power and authority of God works. That means cross is where the power and authority of the kingdom of God works. That means the one who is reigning with authority and power is sitting on the cross. That means the power and authority of the kingdom of God initiates from the cross. I hope you're seeing this. Because crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, these are not two different things. It's one man who was the Word that was made flesh and went through all of this to show us one message. Okay? And that was to deal with the old and bring in the new. But then, when in the newness, he is still using the cross to work things out inside of us. It's the resurrected Christ that comes to us to talk to us about his crucifixion. You see this in the story of Luke chapter 24, those who were in the road to Emmaus. The resurrected Christ comes to talk to them about what? About his crucifixion, that how the Christ was to suffer and be crucified and be raised from the in the third day. So that's how it happened. And it says that opened their eyes. Suddenly they saw him. Before that they were blind, but now they can see him. So that blindness was gone away. The darkness was gone away. They were not walking in darkness anymore. They were walking in light. They had fellowship with light, and they were bearing the fruit of that. This is how it works. So anyways, he says, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Okay. Now, it's the power of God. Now we're going to look at a couple other places that actually the cross is mentioned by this same person, Paul, who is adding to this revelation and realize what actually this cross does or has done. Let's first look at Colossians chapter 2. Colossians chapter 2. Let's start from verse 13, but I'm going to get to verse 14 after that. And you, being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven all your trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. Wow. Having nailed it to the cross. Okay, he says there was something. And that something was a requirement, and he has taken that requirement out of the way and nailed it to the cross. In fact, it says it was against us, and he has taken it out of the way and he has nailed it to the cross. Then he says it was contrary to us, and he says he has taken it out of the way and nailed it to the cross. Okay, so he says all this, the handwritings of the requirements that was against us, that was contrary to us, he has taken it away and nailed it to the cross. So other than you being crucified or you being on the cross, the old man, the flesh, he says that which was also against you, the handwritings of requirements, that which was a requirement, that which was a regulation, that which was something that you were supposed to do, he says he has nailed it to the cross also. So the cross, the message of the cross is the revelation of, when you look at the cross, you realize that which was against you is on the cross. That which was biting you is being crucified. So you won't be bitten again if you fix your eyes on the cross. That means your ears will not hear anything else if you fix your eyes on the cross. Fix your eyes on the cross, and that which was supposed to be speaking to you, you see it on the cross, dead. Okay, remember the Garden of Eden, there was a serpent speaking, and then there was a tree that they ate from. So he says all that story finds its fulfillment, basically not its fulfillment, not its destruction, in the story of the cross of Christ. It is where you realize that that which was speaking to you, that which had a sting, that which was biting you, now is under the cross. God has done this. And he says, this was against you, it was contrary to you, and I didn't want something to be contrary to you, to be against you. I didn't want anything to be a requirement against you, so I've done it. I've nailed it to the cross. So don't change your focus. Don't take away your eyes from the cross. If there is something that you must behold, is the cross. Okay, so okay, let me show you a couple more places so it actually strengthens what I'm trying to tell you. Look at Ephesians chapter 2 to understand what was this handwritings of requirements. Ephesians chapter 2. Look at verse 13. Verse 13. But now in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he himself is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the middle wall of separation, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, that is, the law of commandments in ordinances, so as to create in himself one new man from the two, thus making peace, and that he might reconcile them both to God in one body through the cross, thereby putting to death the enmity. Okay, to reconcile them both to God, to reconcile them both to God in one body through the cross, thereby putting to death the enmity. Okay, so we looked at the word enmity in verse 15 and verse 16. In verse 15, he said, he has abolished in his flesh the enmity, that is the law of commandment. So the enmity is the law of commandment. Okay? The enmity is the law of commandment. Now, in Colossians chapter 2 verse 14, we looked at the handwritings of the requirement that was against us. It was nailed to the cross also. That handwritings of requirements here by Paul, once again, is mentioned this time as the law of commandments. The handwritings of requirements is the law of commandments. And he says that's the enmity. That's the enmity. And he says that's the one that he has put to death in verse 16, thereby putting to death the enmity. So the cross is where the handwritings of the requirements, which is the law of commandments, have been also crucified, has been nailed to the cross. Okay, that's why Paul constantly goes on to say, I boast in nothing except the cross of Christ, by whom the world has been crucified to me and I to the world. There is no boasting in flesh, or he constantly says, there is no confidence in the flesh. In flesh, I can't do anything, but the cross of Christ can do all things. That's why I preach the cross. That's why my message is the message of the cross. It's foolishness to people because they think like, what is the cross? What can a piece of wood do to me? Why would someone else's death do something to me? Oh, now this is the thing. Someone else's death is the proof of his love for you. Because he said, you know, you are, this is the beauty of it. I'm talking about now his life laid down being a proof that he is our friend. Now also, at the same time, seeing there is an enmity, which is the law of commandment against us. So you better know who your friend is and don't mix it with your enemy. Okay, so there is a friend and there is an enemy. And Christ Jesus says, no one, there's no greater love than this, than one would lay down his life for his friends, and you are my friends. What does that mean? That means the life laid down on the cross is the proof that the man that is on the cross, and he laid down his life for the world, by the way, we see that multiple times, he's the friend of the people. He's the friend of the people that actually live in this world. And he has come to take away the enmity. See, the message of the cross is the revelation of the love of God for mankind, that God has been their friend from the beginning. Abraham believed God and he was called a friend of God. Why? Because he believed that God is his friend. That God is not his enemy. That God said, I will take your enemies. I will I will give to your seed to possess the gates of their enemies. God is my friend. The message of the cross is the message of the friendship of God with mankind. It's the message of the love of God for mankind. And anything else, that enmity, he says, it was actually the law of commandment. Or if you look at Romans chapter, I'm tempted to go there, but let me see if I should. I have a few more minutes. Okay, look at Romans chapter 8. We're looking at enmity once again. Romans chapter 8, verse 7. It says, because the carnal mind, which is, by the way, the mind of the flesh is enmity against God. Okay, the enmity against God. He says, I, by the way, remember, I was the flesh once because I am being crucified and it's the flesh that was crucified. So the I was flesh. I covered this in the last week's message. So he says that now the mind of that flesh was enmity against God. But at the same time, Jesus laid down his life and he said, this is a proof of my friendship to you. So the enmity was from mankind toward God, but the cross is where God puts an end to this enmity by revealing his love, his friendship. Okay, so what are you having? You see man who is hostile toward God, who is an enemy of God in his mind by the way he thinks. This is how he is enemy of God. Not that God is his enemy, man is the enemy of God by how he thinks. Okay, so he says he is the enemy, and then someone comes to preach a message, not by words, but by a life lived, and he lays down that life for them, and then he says, okay, this is to show you that I love you. This is to say that I am your friend. So two people stand face to face, one on the cross, the other one on the ground, and one is looking at the other, and the other one is looking at the other, and one is the enemy of the other, and that other is actually the friend of that one. So who wins? Who do you think is gonna win in this situation? Well, the one that has love, the one, because everything will go away, everything will cease, only love will remain. Why? Because love is patient, is long-suffering. Love will believe all things, will hope all things, will abide in all things. But the enmity cannot. That mind of flesh cannot. So this love will change everything. That's why we preach the cross. That's why Paul preached the cross. He didn't care about how man lives, what man thinks. Of course, he brought correction, but he always preached this because he knew that the message of the cross, as the power of God, is able to deal with anything else. If the message is preached enough, that enmity that is in the mind of man will give its place to belief. And when it believes, it receives that which is already true. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this week's message. So we talked about being crucified, and we talked about also the cross and what it does. But in the next video and the next week's message, basically, I will be sharing with you now that portion that is being crucified, which is the flesh, to look at what is this flesh and look at a few things about that. Maybe that will help you also. All right, bless you guys. Remember, you can never visit anything beyond the cross. Always fix your eyes on the cross. Let the message of the cross speak to you and open your ears, because it is the power of God, and you will experience the power that you need in your life.